It's week 3 of rankings, and today we have the small forwards. If you missed the first two, the point guards and the shooting guards, check out the channel, as every single Tuesday we're going to be releasing a new position, eventually capping off that stretch with a top 10 overall players in the league rankings. So if that interests you at all, please support us down below. We're on the road to 500 subs on the channel, a mind-blowing milestone that we're close to hitting, so help us get to that point. We can't get there without you guys. But before we get into that, we do have to run through the criteria of these rankings, and of course we're going to get into some honorable mentions. But after that, we're going to be finishing off the video with some of the recent news around both the NBA and NFL, including the D-HOP to Tennessee move. So as always, timestamps will be in the description of the video. But without further ado, this is the Anomaly Podcast. I'm Owen. Let's talk some criteria. Alright, as you see on your screen, this is the same criteria we've had for the first two positions, and will be so for the remainder of these rankings. But again, we're going to be going off of overall skill and arsenal, right? Their skill set, their health and their availability, their recent team success, their situation, individual stats, individual moments, and again, positions will be based off of Basketball Reference. Again, this is going to be based off of lately, so maybe the last 2 or 3 years, kind of, give or take what we've seen of them as of late. Injuries can happen, but big moments could be from 2 years ago, and we're going to count that here in today's video. But basically, everything we're going to be accounting for here with these rankings, plain and simple. But moving over to the honorable mentions, we see Andrew Wiggins, Scotty Barnes, Michael Porter Jr., Franz Wagner, and Tobias Harris. But I have a quick disclaimer before we talk about these guys, as I started these lists a couple weeks ago, and that was before the latest report Bradley Beal was going to be running point guard for the Suns, and that campaign was going to be traded to the San Antonio Spurs. So with that being said, the lineup that I used for the Phoenix Suns goes as follows. We used the campaign, Bradley Beal, Devin Booker at the 3, Kevin Durant, and DeAndre Ayton. That's just the first lineup I saw after the Bradley Beal trade, so that's the lineup I used for these rankings, right, for these videos. Just so you guys know that. For the top 10 overall players rankings, though, the positions aren't going to matter, but we will have those guys at their right positions. Some honorable mentions that didn't make the cut were guys like Lou Dort or Keegan Murray or even Marcus Smart, if he's going to be playing the 3 there for Memphis. Those are some guys that didn't make the cut on the screen, but they are in our hearts. But Andrew Wiggins, this is a guy that's a great two-way player. He played a pivotal part in the Warriors title run just 2 years ago, and he's had some off-the-court stuff in his personal life, so we didn't get to see much of him last year. But maybe next year he can come back, get his feet back under him, and he can crack the list yet again. A guy like Scotty Barnes, a young, promising forward who just 2 years ago was the Rookie of the Year, but he definitely had a sophomore slump of a season, and hopefully he bounces back, right? There's speculations that Pascal might be on the move. Maybe that just opens up more opportunity there for Scotty to take a leap. I know they're going to try and run him at the point guard a little bit this year, so that'll be interesting. Michael Porter Jr. is another guy, a 6'10" small forward who can shoot lights out from 3. I mean, those guys don't come around often, right? But aside from pass, he does a little bit of everything for Denver offensively, and he played a pivotal part in the Nuggets title run last year. I mean, he really picked it up game 5 or 6, regardless. I don't see why he doesn't continue to improve like he has every single year of his career and make Denver even more dangerous moving forward. Franz Wagner, this is a guy that he's a young man, but due to his situation in Orlando, he's not in a big market, and for that reason, he's going to be super underrated for his entire career. But now given he's going to be also the Robin to Paolo's Batman for his career, or at least his time in Orlando, but he's still a guy who plays at his own pace, kind of like a Luka, but at a lesser degree, and he can still go out there and get you a triple-double on any given night. So Franz Wagner, a very underrated guy that if you're sleeping on him, please go ahead and watch some highlights or just watch some game tape of Franz. He's a very gifted younger player here in the league. And finally, Tobias Harris, a guy I wanted to throw out on this list, as he's a veteran. On some days he's a third option for the Sixers. On others, he's a fourth option right there with Tyrese Maxey. But he's playing for a Sixers team that's trying to compete for a title, and he's taking that back seat to sacrifice and trying to win the title. But don't be mistaken. I think Tobias can still go out there and at times create his own shot, give you 20 to 25 if others are lacking on the offensive end. And he's a big part why this Sixers team year in and year out is a perennial playoff team, right? A team that has the potential to make some serious noise. But that is going to do it for the honorable mentions. Again, other guys that didn't make the cut on the screen were Lou Dort, Keegan Murray, some other guys like that. Maybe like a Josh Hart is a guy you could throw on that list. But regardless, we're going to move over here to the top 10 small forwards. And my number 10 spot is going to be Lauri Markkanen, forward for the Utah Jazz. And as a Cavs fan, I'm both happy and hurt with this selection at the number 10 spot. For the person and the career of Lauri Markkanen, I'm happy because he was able to spread his wings finally, and he was able to have a career year after being traded away from the Cavs, and he became a first-time All-Star. So shout out to Lauri for the incredible season. I'm sure he's going to get a big payday for these next couple of years in Utah, but I'm also hurt because, well, selfishly, he didn't do that here on the Cavs. Regardless, this is a guy that just averaged 26 points, 7 rebounds a game on shooting splits that hover around the 50-40-90 club. So this is a guy that had an amazing year, and I mean, hey, I'm just looking at his stats now. He shot 40% from 3 on 7 attempts a game, as a big man. That is absolutely crazy. It shows the revolution of the game, the evolution rather. But Lauri went from a guy who was a passed-around shooter around the league with a bit more of a bigger contract to he's now maybe a franchise cornerstone for the Utah Jazz moving forward. So again, shout out to Lauri. Hopefully he gets a big payday in a couple years, and he should be the guy there for the next couple years, as hopefully they can build a real contender in Utah. Moving over to my number 9, I have Mikal Bridges. And talk about a change of scenery. I mean, last year in his 56 games with Phoenix, his first 56 games, he was averaging about 17 points as a fourth option, really, in that offense that he was mostly known for the All-NBA defense that he brought there for Phoenix. But then, of course, he was in the mega deal that traded Kevin Durant from the Brooklyn Nets to the Phoenix Suns. And again, Mikal went to Brooklyn. And in those 27 games with Brooklyn to close out the regular season, his averages jumped across the board. He went from 17 points to 26 points per game. That's a 9-point increase. His field goal attempts jumped up by 5. His free throw attempts jumped up by 5. His 3-point attempts per game jumped up by 3. So his aggressiveness across the board was there, and he did all of this while having the same or a better percentage from the field. This guy spread his wings quite literally, and some, even drew the comparisons to Kevin Durant in those 27 games there in Brooklyn. Now, I wouldn't go that far, but he definitely opened up a lot of eyes, and he's now a cornerstone for a franchise that has kind of diminished over the last couple of years, to say the least. But Mikal Bridges, a guy who has shown a lot of promise offensively, defensively. This is a guy that is going to be an elite two-way player for years and years to come. And not to mention, this dude is an Iron Man, right? He has barely missed a game. I don't think he's missed a game in his 5-year career. So it'll be interesting to see the future of Brooklyn. But for now, like I said, they have one of the better two-way guys in the league to build with going forward. So he's at my number 9 spot strictly because he brings a little bit more two-way ability and shot creation ability over a guy like Lauri Markkanen. But my number 8 spot, we're going to go with Chris Middleton. Aside from last year, over the last 5 or so years of his career, we're talking about a guy that gives you about 20 points a game on 50-40-90 splits, year in and year out, with borderline All-NBA defense. He is consistency. He is the epitome of a Robin, and he is the epitome of consistency for championship-winning teams. But as I mentioned, last year was a down year for Chris Middleton, and a lot of that can be scrapped up due to various injuries that he had over the year, as he can never really get his feet back under him from the injury 2 years ago, let alone the couple small injuries he had this year. And when he did kind of, get his feet back under him late in the year, Giannis went down in that first round against the Heat. So a lot fell apart for this dominant Bucks team in the postseason, or late in the season, right? But Chris, next year, he should come back fully healthy like he usually is. And for my projections on this Bucks team, last year I had him as the best Bucks team of all time. To me, I believe they should come into this year as title favorites. Giannis should have a chip on his shoulder. Drew should have a chip on his shoulder, as well as Chris Middleton. So this team is back and they're ready to compete for another run. They just need to be healthy, right? And hopefully Chris Middleton can get his feet back under him and be the Chris Middleton we all know, right? The Robin around the league. But moving over to my number 7 spot, I have Brandon Ingram. I'd say baby KD, but I don't think KD's ever missed an entire second half of a year due to a toe contusion, right? Regardless, this is a guy that has that nickname for a reason. He's a 6'8" wing that can dribble and score with the best of them. He averages 23 points a night over the last 4 years. And last year, he gave you 25 a night on great efficiency. Again, there's a reason that comparison there for KD is a real thing. But whether if it was due to coaching or just the inconsistencies in health with this team, in Brandon Ingram's time with the New Orleans Pelicans, they haven't been able to put it all together for a serious playoff run to win a couple series, let alone one. But they have the overall talent, they have the depth. I think they're missing a 6'6" power forward who can jump out of the gym with elite athleticism and a guy that is a bully that can score 30 plus a night. I think that's what they're missing. But maybe, if they can get someone like that on the court, maybe they can put it all together and be a serious team, because last year, at times, this Pelicans team was hovering at that number one spot in the Western Conference. But Brandon Ingram's amazing. Again, a 6'8" wing that can pretty much do it all offensively. We'd like to see a little bit more defensively, but his offense is just that good where he makes the number 7 spot on this list. And moving over to my number 6 spot is DeMar DeRozan. This is a guy that's coming off of a back-to-back, all-star years. But Chicago as a team is coming off of 2 disappointing seasons where 2 years ago they got off hot and they were one of the best teams, but they struggled against good teams. And in this past year, they kind of fell apart. Regardless, these 2 years in Chicago, they have struggled to find any playoff success. And a large part of that, to me, is that they're still trying to figure out this offense, right? How is the Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan going to work on the court? What's the fullest potential this can see with these two as the duo? But DeMar DeRozan, like I mentioned, he's coming off of back-to-back All-Star years for Chicago. And in that time, he's averaged about 25, 5, and 5. He's still on top of his game. Though his numbers took a little bit of a hit last year with the hiring of Billy Donovan, again, he's still on top of his game, still doing what we know DeMar can do here in the NBA, and he's still one of the few guys that he doesn't rely on the three-pointer, right? He would rather live in the mid-range, and he's really made a career out of that mid-range area, but his time in Chicago, it may be coming to an end. So it'll be interesting to see how next year plays out, how hard he plays, or does he get traded mid-season next year? Regardless, I think the next year or two for Chicago, it's going to be a big year for them and their timeline going forward, as I think one of these guys are going to get traded. Will it be DeMar DeRozan? And I'd be interested to see where DeMar goes, because he does have a distinct playing style. Regardless, I want to ask you guys down in the comments, where do you think DeMar goes? Back-to-back All-Star. He can give you 25 to 30 a night. Where do you think a guy like DeMar could go? That'd be a very interesting fit around the league. But regardless, we're going to move over to number 5, the top 5, and I'm going to start this by saying that this top 5 is more controversial than you can think anything else, right? This might be the most controversial top 5 you'll ever see. But I will let you guys know right now that I tried my best, and I'm going to give you the reasons behind all of these top 5 guys. But we're going to start here with Kawhi Leonard, the guy that once kicked DeMar out of Toronto because DeMar was traded to the Spurs for the Claw, Kawhi Leonard. And I know, how do you put a player of this caliber, a player of Kawhi Leonard's caliber, this low on the list, especially at his position? To me, it simply all just came down to recent playoff success and availability. It's as simple as that. But on the flip side, when Kawhi did play, he still looked like Kawhi Leonard. He still looked dominant as usual. He's an all-NBA defender that can give you 24, 25 points on the offensive end. But then when we got to the playoffs this past year, he looked even better. With no Paul George due to his injury, he still took game 1 off of the talented Suns team with Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and DeAndre Ayton. At times, Kawhi Leonard was limiting Kevin Durant and Devin Booker on the offensive end. There's no person on this planet that has ever been able to slow down Kevin Durant, but if there was one, it would be Kawhi Leonard. He's that talented on the defensive side of the ball, but again, he tore his knee in the playoff series, and if he didn't do that, again, maybe the Clippers can shock the world and win that series, go on to face the Denver Nuggets in the second round, and maybe the Clippers have Paul George back there with Kawhi Leonard. But that has been the story of this duo there in LA. It's maybe or ifs, if this happens or maybe this happens, they can get here. But it's all just a matter of health. And Kawhi Leonard hasn't done that the same time in years that Paul George has done that. And that is really the reason I think this is a big year for the Clippers, as Steve Ballmer, he's very impatient. And if this is not a championship level year for the Clippers, I think one of them gets moved, right? And that'd be very interesting if it is Kawhi. But I think it's more so PG because he's already in trade talks. But it'll be a very interesting year to see, if this duo can't stay healthy again, maybe one of them gets moved. But for this list exclusively, Kawhi Leonard's no doubt a top 5 small forward. The only reason these top 4 guys are here is because, 1, of availability, and 2, recent playoff success. That is the only reason that Kawhi is number 5. Moving over to number 4, we do have Jimmy Butler. Playoff Jimmy, Himmy Buckets, whatever you want to call him. He just had one of the best playoff runs in NBA history, and that alone has him over Kawhi Leonard for me, again, as of late. But the Miami Heat, they strolled through the regular season, right? They were kind of on cruise control, as they always typically do. They finished as a 7th seed, and they were, of course, the best play-in team available. But that gave them 2 chances to potentially make the postseason, as we know with the play-in tournament. In that first game, they played the Atlanta Hawks, which they lost. But if they won, they would have played against Boston in the first round, which we'll get back to Boston here in a second. But the Hawks won that game. The Heat were then in a winner-go-home situation in the second game against Chicago. But they put it all together. They won, and then they had the privilege to go against, in my opinion, the best Milwaukee Bucks team of all time. And Giannis went down with an injury. Miami, their depth stepped up. Jimmy stepped up. And they became one of the few 8 seeds in NBA history to take advantage of that injury. But they also beat a number 1 seed in the first round of the playoffs. One of the few 8 seeds to ever do it. And they did it against one of the best teams of all time for their franchise, in my opinion. But the Jimmy Butler, I mean, in that series, he had a 55 or 56-point game in one of those later games in the series. And again, they gentlemen swept the Bucks in the first round. It is worth note that Giannis did go down to an injury. But the Heat can't control who goes down in front of them. They can only control what's out there on the court. And then they move on to the second round. They play the New York Knicks. And the Knicks, I mean, they looked dominant in the first round. The Cavs were coming out. Some people had them upsetting the Bucks in the second round. Some people had the Cavs going as far as the Eastern Conference Finals. The Knicks said, nah. They went up there and they beat them in 6. They took care of business. And Jimmy did roll his ankle in that series. But the Heat still held on and they won in 6 games. Moving over to the Eastern Conference Finals, which we talked about them earlier, but they met up with the Boston Celtics, and it was a tough series, back and forth, but Miami, they made the right adjustments, and they beat those guys in 6 as well, and they became just the second 8 seed in NBA history to ever make the NBA Finals. Now, Jimmy and the Heat, they underperformed in the finals, and they fell short of their goal, but to just lead the first ever play-in team to a win, a playoff series win, and to also make the NBA Finals, that is historic in itself. So shout out to Jimmy, shout out to the Heat. Right now they're trying to figure out their roster construction for next year, Damian Lillard. But I would just prefer the top 3 guys over him as far as just regular season work, right, and overall playoff success in the last couple years. But Jimmy Butler, it's a very hard argue that just based off of this playoff run, he should be top 3. He could even easily be top 2. But just due to the Suns lineup construction, which how I have it, and just the other 2 guys, I would prefer them over Jimmy Butler on a year-in, year-out basis. And one of those guys is Jason Tatum, one of the guys that Jimmy Butler beat on his route to the NBA Finals. But I'm still going to take Jason Tatum. You know, it was a career year across the board for Tatum last year. He was averaging 30 points per game, 8 rebounds, 5 assists with a steal a game on good efficiency. So he did a bit of everything here for Boston last year. He was an all-star starter. He was an all-star MVP in that game. And he also dropped the most points in an all-star game ever with 55 points. Of course, again, he was the all-star game MVP. So then he would end the season with an all-NBA selection. He led his team to the Eastern Conference Finals, where he scored the most points in a Game 7 in NBA history, en route to get there in the second round. So this guy did everything this season, right? Regular season success, all-star success, breaking some records along the way. He was an all-NBA player, and he also led his team to the Eastern Conference Finals, right, where he also has the most points in a Game 7 ever. Tatum might be a shoo-in for a top 10 player in the NBA today, but of course, that is also up for discussion. Regardless of what you think about Jason Tatum, he's going to be the leader of the Celtics franchise for the next decade, most likely, and he should have plenty of deep playoff runs with the culture and the team and the depth that they have for the next couple years. But can they get over the hump and win a couple championships? That's going to be the biggest question, and I think these next 5 to 10 years of Tatum's career are going to be what we mainly look at here when we try and rank him after his career is all done and over. But my number 2 spot, in Devin Booker, he has had such an underrated season, right, in my opinion, from last year, as in my mind, he went from a star, right, covering with the superstar category, to now he's a full-blown superstar, right, and a lot of it is not off statistics. A lot of it is off of the eye test, right? But you can break down his season last year into like 3 or so different categories, or 3 or so different chapters, so to speak. As if we had to do chapters, chapter 1 would be the first 25 or so games of his season where he showed his amazing scoring ability, right? He was averaging like 28 points a game on great shooting splits to start the year, And he even had a 51-point game against the Bulls where he barely missed a shot. I think he missed 2 shots from the field and 1 from 3. Incredible game from Devin Booker, and he scored those 51 without playing in the fourth quarter. This is a guy that is that special with the ball, especially on the offensive end. But then in Chapter 2, right, we're going to say that this is the chapter filled with injuries, riddled with injuries, as he suffered a hamstring injury on December 9th against the New Orleans Pelicans, which that sidelined him for a couple of games, but then he returned, dropped a season-high 58 points against the Pelicans just a few weeks later, and then he was out for 3 more games. He tried returning on Christmas against the Nuggets. He eventually pulled his groin in that game, and total time in this Chapter 2, we'll say he missed 21 or so games with these injuries. And finally in Chapter 3, which was the end of the season, the tail end of the season, when it matters most, he returned early February, and in those final 24 regular season games, he was averaging about 29 points per game on season-high splits from the field. He also did that while trying to mesh with the newly acquired Kevin Durant. But in that time, this duo led them to the 4th seed in the Western Conference. And in that first round and in the second round, in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, Devin Booker may have had the greatest individual playoff run in Phoenix Suns history, as they had a 6-5 record, which includes taking 2 games off of the Denver Nuggets, which no other team could do this postseason, and that is the Suns not at full health because Chris Paul was out. What's new? But Devin Booker in the playoffs was averaging 34 a night with 7 assists on great shooting splits, giving you great defense. To me, if we had to appoint a modern-day Kobe Bryant, it is not Jason Tatum. It is Devin Booker. You have to watch him to understand why I have him this high and why I have him over guys like Jimmy Butler, Kawhi, and Jason Tatum. Devin Booker, off the eye test. This guy is amazing, and he is a superstar in this league, no doubt in my mind, for the next decade, right, at least. And the number 1 spot. This might be a hot take, but I'm not ready to say LeBron is not number 1 at his position. I'm ready to say he's not number 1 in the league, but I'm not ready to say he's not number 1 at his current position, especially if there's a reason not to. There's really not enough you can say about this man. I mean, he's 38 years old. He's going to be 39 by the time next year ends, and he's going to be in his 21st NBA season. He just passed Kareem last year on the all-time scoring list. He is arguably the GOAT, and he's coming back for another year. Sure, I'll say this. He didn't finish off last year the way that we all expected or he wanted to, but until this year, we've never seen a play-in team win a series, let alone make it to the Western Conference Finals, and he did that along with Jimmy Butler, and those two, I mean, LeBron, he continues to amaze me, even at his age, as the leader that he is, as the scorer, and just overall player that he is at his age. It's amazing. But the GOAT's going to be back next year. He's returning with his old number 23, which will be exciting to see. And he has the roster. He has the coaching to get his 5th championship. We'll have to see if this team and this coaching staff can be healthy and they can all put it together on the court at the right time. This might be his last year in LA, in my opinion. So hopefully he can end on a high note, as next year he might be in Utah, he might be in OKC. He's going to be wherever Bronny James is. So we're going to have to see how other teams will play out next year as far as tanking to get their hands on Bronny, because LeBron will be making his way over as well. But moving over here, just to recap, my top 10 was Lauri Markkanen, Mikal Bridges, Chris Middleton, Brandon Ingram, and DeMar DeRozan was my 10 through 6. And my top 5 was Kawhi Leonard, Jimmy Butler, Jason Tatum, Devin Booker, and LeBron James. Let me know what you guys think down below. That'll be, of course, on all my social medias. I'm sure it'll be a big debate, but that is going to be my top 10 small forwards going into next season. Moving over to Around the NBA, where we look at the latest news and rumors around the NBA. Pretty self-explanatory, but we're going to start here with the Phoenix Suns, as they've been busy the last week or so, as they are going to be trading Cam Payne to the San Antonio Spurs for a second-round pick. It's also being reported the Suns are going to be running Bradley Beal at the 1 next season, so that'll be interesting. He's never been a point guard, right? He's always had John Wall or Ish Smith, but he's now going to be the point guard there in Phoenix, so that'll be interesting. And also, they're also going to Suns, are going to sign Bol Bol to a 1-year contract, which that's going to be an interesting fit if he can get actual PT off the bench, as he was seemingly cut for no reason by the Magic, and now he is ready to take on a new challenge in Phoenix. But to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense for the Spurs why they would bring a guy like Cam Payne in, because he's not a young star, right? But he's not a veteran that can really help your team grow. maybe it's just a a veteran presence to bring in for a guy like Wemby. But I don't know if Cam Payne is the guy to do that, to be completely honest. LeBron James, we mentioned him just a few moments ago, but he's going to be changing his number back to 23 next year, right? The number that we all know LeBron for. But he was number 6 for the last couple years for the Los Angeles Lakers. But he's changing back to 23 in respect for the late, great Bill Russell, who passed last year. So rest in peace to Bill Russell. But LeBron, out of respect for the great legend, will be changing back to number 23. Paul Reed, center for the 76ers, received an offer from the Utah Jazz. The 76ers are going to match that deal to bring him back on a 3-year, $23 million deal. And, I mean, hey, Paul Reed was happy the 76ers matched the deal. I'd be happy too, right? If you're staying in Phoenix next to a championship-ready roster, to be honest. Dante Exum, guard that has showed a lot of promise in like 2015, 2016. He was, blackballed from the league, it seemed like. He went overseas and he won the MVP a couple times. And now he is signing a 2-year deal with the Dallas Mavericks after winning the MVP overseas. So that's going to be an interesting fit. He's played at this level before. How is he going to adapt again to not get phased out the league one more time? Daryl Morey, GM for the 76ers, he has a crazy asking price for James Harden, who wants to be traded out of Philadelphia. And this is no shocker. Daryl Morey is always trying to finesse other GMs around the league. He's always trying to get more than maybe what he needs from this trade, or maybe what's enough, right? He's always trying to get an upper hand on the deal. So I can't blame him, but sooner or later, you're just going to have to make a deal, right? Whatever side it's better for. And final news here is that Karl Anthony Towns, it's been reported by Minnesota insiders that he was in trade talks for Minnesota prior to the draft, and we wondered, right? But the front office finally sees what the world sees. At least in my opinion, it is going to be Anthony Edwards' team for the next foreseeable future. So in my opinion, build accordingly. Now, Cat does fit perfectly alongside Ant's aggressive attack play style. But, I mean, hey, if they don't see that it fits on paper, if it doesn't fit on the court, why not go out there and trade Karl Anthony Towns, as he's your best trade asset to build other, get other talent around Anthony Edwards, because no one in the world is taking Rudy Gobert. Maybe the Spurs, right? And finally here, we're only about 30 minutes in, so a quicker show today, but I mean, hey, that's just what happens when we get to the point. We get in and out and do what we have to do. And the news finally came out after a month hiatus. DeAndre Hopkins is going to be a Tennessee Titan, a 2-year, $26 million deal in Tennessee. I mean, it's the place where all Hall of Fame receivers go to end their careers. I mean, Julio Jones, Randy Moss, Andre Johnson are a few names that just come to mind. But for DeAndre Hopkins, I'm hoping this is not a Julio Jones situation all over again, as after years with Atlanta, Julio Jones ended up in Tennessee. He was 32 years old, and he never looked like himself again, right? Whether if it was injuries or just simply being in a non-pass focused offense, Julio kind of phased out of the league after his time in Tennessee. DeAndre Hopkins is now 31 years old, and after years with Arizona, he's now in Tennessee, right? We know the talent is there. We know DeAndre Hopkins is going to be himself. He's going to be the alpha in this offense. However, it's going to be the same exact situation that Julio Jones was in his last days with Tennessee, as it's going to be a team with a great coach. It's going to be a team with a great running back and some solid defensive pieces. But whether if it was because the team is uninterested or they don't have the talent at the quarterback position, this offense is still going to be a very non-pass focused offense, and we can see DeAndre Hopkins, his numbers drop significantly. But for D-Hop personally, I mean, we all know where his priorities are now, as he'd rather get his bag than compete for Super Bowls. And no shade to that, right? Get your bag, get your money. That's generational money. I'm sure you're going to be great in Tennessee there next to Treylon Burks. But why not sign in Kansas City, right? Help them win a ring. This is an offense and team that wants you, right? Go out there and be the alpha receiver in a pass-happy offense with the best player in the league in Pat Mahomes as your quarterback. Then go out there after next year and get your bag from another team, right? Whether if that's Kansas City or another team. Go out there and get your bag after winning a Super Bowl, right? Cement yourself as one of the greatest receivers to ever play this game. But again, I'm happy for DeAndre Hopkins and his family. I'm just shocked by the priorities and where they're at right now. But it's also shocking it took a month for DeAndre Hopkins to decide on the Tennessee Titans. But that's going to do it for today's show. As if you guys enjoyed, I mean, we ran through a little bit of everything, right? We went through our top 10 small forwards. We ran through some NBA news, some NFL news, most notably DeAndre Hopkins. But that is, again, going to do it for today's show. As if you enjoyed what you listened to or heard at any point, please support us down below. Drop a like, subscribe to the channel. Shorter episode today, but that's what happens when we get in and out. Do what we have to do. But again, we will see you guys tomorrow for some fantasy football content. That's always going to be fun. You guys enjoy the Build a Team series, and it's back tomorrow. So turn your notifications on, right? Come back tomorrow for that episode, and we'll see you guys then. Stay happy, stay healthy.